Welcome back to Ready Player None, the only podcast that when editing a previous episode noticed this particular sentence. His obsessive adherence to routine and preoccupation with a few obscure areas of interest led many psychologists to conclude that Halliday had suffered from Asperger's syndrome or from some other form of high-functioning autism. What do you mean, suffered from? So autistic people are suffering just by existing? Fuck you! After the quote-unquote exciting cliffhanger ending of the previous chapter, Chapter 7 seems to be the one where the plot threatens to finally begin to start commencing. Wade's Latin teacher, Ms. Rank, is conjugating Latin verbs on her chalkboard. To learn, discere, she said. Now, this one should be easy to remember because it's similar to the English word discern, which also means to learn. Hearing to learn reminds Wade of the limerick, and specifically the line, "You have much to learn." This gives Wade the epiphany, and that was when it hit me, like an anvil falling out of the sky directly onto my skull. I gazed around at my classmates. What group of people has much to learn? Students. High school students. So Wade reasons the Tomb of Horrors must be hiding somewhere on the planet Ludus, the school planet. Ludus is of course also a Latin word meaning school, but using his inbuilt Latin dictionary, Wade finds out it also could mean sport or game. Sidebar, this all happens on page 69.
Nice.
With the amount of money that Halliday has personally put into the planet Ludus, including setting up a foundation ensuring that the Oasis public school system would always have the money it needed to operate, Wade reasoned that Halliday created something behind the scenes, especially since he named the planet. According to the original D&D module, the entrance to the Tomb of Horrors was hidden near a low, flat-topped hill about 200 yards wide and 300 yards long. The top of the hill was covered with large black stones that were arranged in such a way that, if you viewed them from a great height, they resembled the eye sockets, nose holes, and teeth of a human skull. So this tomb must be hidden somewhere in the dense forest land between all the different schools on Ludus. Unexplored, unmapped, randomly generated trees and forests, which of course Wade, having no money to leave the planet, has spent enough time walking around to realise quite how possible that could be. At this point, we also find that he'd considered killing the occasional bird, rabbit, or squirrel for the experience points. Because what you look for in a sympathetic main protagonist are also the early signs of a potential future serial killer. Wade has an agonising 17-minute wait until the end of the school day, represented by 2 entire paragraphs. But that gave him enough time to consider that if Ludus was the hiding place of the Copper Key, perhaps Halliday had wanted a school kid to find it. After the bell rings and the classroom is finally empty, Wade pulls up a map of Ludus on his display, giving me yet another chance to be overly concerned about the mechanics of this school planet. Ludus was a relatively small planet by Oasis standards, about a third the size of Earth's moon, with a circumference of exactly 1,000 kilometres. A single contiguous continent covered the surface. There were no oceans, just a few dozen large lakes placed here and there. Since Oasis planets weren't real, they didn't have to obey the laws of nature. On Ludus, it was perpetually daytime, regardless of where you stood on the surface, and the sky was always a perfect cloudless blue. The stationary sun that hung overhead was nothing but a virtual light source programmed into the imaginary sky. If there's only one sun, how is the entire planet in daylight? It's a virtual light source. That implies that it is a light source. You could have cleaned this up by just having one sun either side of the planet, or just said that the sun wasn't a light source at all and that it was just a poorly rendered PS2 world with no lighting model. Wade downloads an image recognition software from GunTorrent, which it took me a moment to figure out was a portmanteau of my new favourite word and the word torrent, and not just about guns. And he uses this plugin to scan the entire surface of Ludus for a hill that matches the hill in the Tomb of Horrors. It takes 10 minutes of automated work to find this potentially plot-important location. 10 whole minutes. I let out a triumphant yell that echoed in the empty classroom and bounced off the walls of my tiny hideout. I'd done it! I'd actually found the Tomb of Horrors! The tomb turns out to be over 400 kilometres from Wade's school. My avatar could run at a maximum speed of 5 kilometres an hour, so it would take me over 3 days to get there on foot if I ran non-stop the entire time. If I could teleport, I could be there within minutes. So in between wondering how he's going to get the money to afford a teleport ticket and considering getting a loan from H, Wade discovers another exploit. He can get a free teleportation ticket to a school an hour away by saying he's following his school's football team at an away game. So that's what the zero-G gymnasium's for. Wrestling, soccer, football, baseball, volleyball, and a few other sports that couldn't be played in the real world, like Quidditch and zero-gravity capture the flag. This book's so obnoxious. After first stopping at his locker to grab his flashlight, sword, shield, and armor, Wade sprints out to the nearest transport terminal, a short walk outside his school. It was a large dome pavilion supported by a dozen ivory pillars. Each pillar bore an Oasis teleportation icon, a capital T in the center of a blue hexagon. School had only been out for a few minutes now, so there was a steady stream of avatars filing into the terminal. Inside were long rows of blue teleportation booths. Their shape and colour always reminded me of Doctor Who's TARDIS. Now, as with Transformers and GoBots earlier, you've stumbled into one of my specialist subjects, Mr. Cline. No self-respecting fan of the show would use the phrase Doctor Who's TARDIS apart from in two very specific scenarios. The first is that they're referring to Peter Cushing's mode of transport in the two Dalek movies from the 1960s. And the second is if you, like me, are a proponent of referring to the main character as Doctor Who in loving, ironic reverence for the show's earliest days. Just say the TARDIS, you idiot. People are going to know what you mean. So Wade ends up at OPS 0571, the football team's opponent's school, where he shows a lack of understanding of the ceremony of a sports game. I wasn't sure why they bothered. They could just as easily have watched the game via vidfeed, and any empty seats in the stands would be filled with randomly generated NPC fans who would wolf down virtual sodas and hot dogs while cheering wildly. Occasionally, they would even do the wave. Look man, it's 2020, and if you're a nerd who hates sports fans, you're just as obnoxious as you think they are. It was the Super Bowl last week, and I'm glad we finally turned on people who say things like sports ball, and superb owl, and Die Hard is a Christmas movie. While auto-running to his destination, Wade receives a call from H that he lets go to voicemail, excluding his closest friend from his life-changing discovery that they've both been searching for years. He also takes the time to read the D&D module's introduction on the Tomb of Horrors. In the far reaches of the world, under a lost and lonely hill, read the module's introduction, lies the sinister Tomb of Horrors. This labyrinthine crypt is filled with terrible traps, strange and ferocious monsters, rich and magical treasures, and somewhere within rests the evil demi-lich. The book even takes the time to define what a lich is. Before now it's made its shout-outs to pop culture speak on their own out of context. The only thing it's over-explained so far is the mechanics of its own virtual world. Being forewarned about the undead Wizard King does not necessarily mean Wade is forearmed. As a third-level wimp with 27 measly hit points, he wouldn't stand a chance against King Acererak? King Acererak the Demi-Lich. The consequences of having your avatar being killed is that you lose all the levels you've accumulated and all the gear you're currently carrying. No doubt this is to set up stakes in future chapters and what sort of tension our heroes are going to face. We've got another instance of XPs here, as well as the implication that Halliday may change things around from the D&D module and have treasures and monsters be in different locations. I don't think so. No, I think this is a derivative work, and I'll leave it ambiguous as to whether I mean the dungeon or this whole book. Wade's path into the forest leads him by trees that seem far too detailed to be randomly generated, like the rest of the woods on Ludus. He finds the skull-topped hill in a large glade or clearing, and following the instructions in the D&D module, uses his shield as a shovel to uncover a dark underground corridor. And so Wade enters into the Tomb of Horrors. And that's the end of chapter 7. Well, what have we learned this chapter? I've learned that I still hate Wade, and that he's a glory hound for excluding his best friend, and that in this far future world of the 2040s, half of your questing adventure is done for you by plugins and downloads. It all feels a bit too easy so far. The exact set of circumstances that Wade was in have led quite coincidentally into him finding the location of a plot-important treasure. If you want the location of an important treasure, you can follow me on Twitter at The Last Gherkin, Tumblr The Last Gherkin, YouTube The Last Gherkin, where you can watch this as a video with subtitles, or thelastgherkin.podbean.com for an MP3 download. Till next time, grab your D20s and get ready to roll for initiative, as we wonder, Dungeons & Dragons isn't in the public domain, how could he get away with this? What's the word? Epitome? Sudden... Inspiration. Epiphany. This gives Wade the epiphany